Parents gave huge amounts of money to have a baby. Now that my child has health issues, they want the money back because he's defective in their eyes. I, 26F, had a baby about 4 months ago with my husband of 3 years, Keith, 27M. We didn't intend to get pregnant, we weren't trying, but when we discovered that we decided to go along with it. My parents were the most excited about it at the time, and ironically, they're the ones who are the least happy about the baby currently. So my parents have always loved the idea of having a big family with lots of kids and grandkids. I have 2 siblings, an older brother, 30M, and a younger sister, 20F. My brother has 2 kids of his own, both under 7 years old. Once I got married, my parents began to pester me about having kids, but I didn't pay any heed to them. It had barely even been a month to my wedding, so I wasn't interested in having a child so soon. I wanted some time alone with Keith before we had kids to travel and have our fun, but my parents started pressuring me within a few months of my marriage. They'd incessantly speak about the joys of being a parent without mentioning any of the difficulties that came along with it. I ignored them back then because I had no other choice than to put up with it. They'd been wonderful parents to all 3 of us, but as we got older, they'd become more and more bothersome to have a conversation with because of their weird obsession with our lives. My brother believed that it was because they were both retired now and didn't have anything to do all day, so they decided to obsess over our lives instead. First, they'd pestered my brother to have kids, which he did because he did want kids of his own at some point. And then once I got married, they started on me. I'd made up my mind that I wasn't gonna let them wear me down, and I'd only have kids whenever I thought I wanted to, so I patiently put up with them for the first couple of months. Then, eventually, I began to tell them that having kids wasn't in the cards for us at the moment, but I'd think about it just to get them off my back. Around a year and a half ago, they approached me and told me very bluntly that I didn't have to worry about the finances of having a baby because they'd cover it all for me and were even ready to give it to me up front. They'd thought that I might have been worried about the financial toll of having a child, and so offered to literally write a check for whatever amount I quoted, as long as they'd have a grandkid in their arms in the coming months. I did some thinking back then and decided that I was going to take a whopping $30,000 from them, for a couple of reasons. Before people start judging me, let me just say that I'm a sales associate and my husband is an insurance agent, so if someone's offering us money, you best believe we'll take them up on that offer. No questions asked. We don't make a fortune at our jobs, and my parents were offering me a blank check to fill in myself for the future, so that was my first reason to agree to their proposition. Secondly, Keith and I had discussed kids and both of us agreed that we definitely did want them, just not right now. It would happen when it would happen, but we weren't going to try on purpose. So I took the money from them, keeping in mind that this money would help us at that moment and we'd have kids whenever we had them, no pressure. It wasn't technically lying, so I didn't feel guilty either. Also, with the way my parents had endlessly been nagging me, taking the money from them actually seemed like a good idea because that would convince them that we were now going to start trying for a baby, and that would finally get them off my back. After I took the money from them, they did ease up on the constant pressure and would only ask if I had news for them instead of their usual have a baby rant every time they visited or I visited them. I didn't have any plans on what to do with the money, even though Keith and I had always talked about multiple things, like taking a vacation or just buying expensive things that we'd always wanted. We didn't end up doing any of that eventually because I guess our conscience didn't allow us to spend the money on anything that didn't serve the purpose it was originally intended for. It'd just feel dishonest, and we didn't want that for ourselves. So we kept the money aside and didn't spend it at all, and as fate would have it, we ended up getting pregnant within a few months itself. Keith and I thought that it was the right time, so we went ahead with the pregnancy, and my parents were also really supportive of me throughout the pregnancy and childbirth. The problems began once my son was born. About a month ago, my son was diagnosed with SID and our world came crashing down around us. It was terrible knowing that my baby was suffering, but it was even worse knowing that there was very little we could do to help except go through with the medical treatments and pray for his well-being. I was never a very religious person, but once my son was diagnosed, I turned to religion because I knew what SID meant and the kind of havoc it could wreak on our lives. Our son is supposed to have a stem cell transplant in a couple of weeks, and Keith is the donor, so I'm just hoping it goes well and my son can make it. In the middle of all this, my parents have been the worst and have been demanding that I return the money I'd taken from them. A week ago, my parents visited me while my husband wasn't at home, and I could tell right away that they weren't here with good news. They seemed very nervous and uncomfortable, which was weird because usually they were excited to play with their grandson. Things had changed after the diagnosis, though, and they hadn't called or checked up on us the way I'd expected them to. In fact, if I remember correctly, their visit 1 week ago was their first visit after the diagnosis, which was strange given their earlier behavior. I'd thought that they were just trying to process the news as well, but was proven wrong when, after some small talk, my parents told me that they would require the money back because my baby wasn't what they'd expected. When I didn't reply, They went on to elaborate and told me that since there was a real possibility that my son wouldn't live for long, they'd like their money back because they felt like giving me the money had been a misstep in the first place. To put it plainly, they wanted a refund of sorts because unfortunately my only son, who isn't even a year old yet, has been diagnosed with a rare autoimmune disease, which means that there's no surety of him living long enough for even his first birthday. I didn't know how to respond to them that day, so I just told them that I had a lot on my plate and I didn't want to talk about this at the time and sent them away. Mostly I was just shocked and had no idea what to say in a situation like that, which is why I just didn't say anything. I probably should have screamed at them and put them in their place, but that would have woken my son up who was napping, so I dealt with them in the most non-violent and civilized way, which was a lot more than what they deserved. When my husband returned home, I told him about what my parents had asked of us, and even he was at a loss of words. They were the ones who had willingly offered me the money as an incentive to have a child and to help us out with our finances, but now that they'd realized that our baby was not the healthy, happy kind that they'd hoped for, they wanted their money back. We were outraged and I didn't want to speak to them ever again, so after discussing with Keith, I blocked their numbers and also blocked them on social media. I didn't send them any message before that because I didn't think it was worth it, but it backfired when the very next day, my sister called me up to ask me why I'd blocked them. She's still living with them, so I guess they're using her as a pawn to get to me, and she's letting them because she needs a roof over her head. At first, I told her that it was none of her business, but after she insisted, I ended up telling her what happened and expected her to empathize with me, but instead, she told me how wrong I was for misleading my parents into believing they'd have a grandkid to pamper and play with for a long time, but then emotionally wrecking them by breaking the news of the diagnosis and then refusing to even pay them back. I got into an argument with her which ended with me blocking her as well because she'd said some very problematic things about me and my baby. She'd called us irresponsible parents for bringing a defective child into the world without thinking about the repercussions. Everyone in the family knew that we hadn't planned for a baby, and during the several doctor's visits, we had never been warned about the risk of our baby having SID. Neither Keith nor I had any idea that this could happen because there was literally a 1 in a million chance of it happening, but unfortunately, it did, and we're just trying our best to deal with it. So I thought it was pretty damn insensitive of them to demand their money back when we were struggling with something so huge. After their phone call, I even called my brother to vent about them, and he agreed that they were being very unreasonable and cruel to me. My son was not a product they'd purchased and were now looking for a refund since it hadn't worked out for them the way they'd wanted it to. Speaking to my brother helped me make sense of things, and for a while, I was able to take my mind off of whatever the situation was with my parents. Unfortunately, they didn't let this go, and 3 days ago, my parents dropped by yet again, but this time Keith was at home with me. He tried to turn them away at the door, but they were insistent and demanded to see me. I just put my son down for a nap and was in no mood to talk to them, but they were refusing to leave, so I eventually had to go out to talk to them. They didn't even spare a second before they started yelling at me and even accused me of being a thief who'd taken their money and in return, birthed a child who would bring us all nothing but misery. They actually accused me of scamming them and said that if I didn't return the money to them, they'd call the cops on me and make sure I landed behind bars. I didn't even bother replying to them and just slammed the door shut in their faces because there wasn't much I could say to something as horrible as that. If they were gonna call me a scammer for just giving birth to my child, then they didn't even deserve a reply. They refused to go away still and kept shouting outside of my house until Keith threatened to call the police and have them escorted off the premises. They finally went away after that, but unfortunately, the bullcrap didn't end there. Yesterday, my sister texted me through her friend's phone and told me that I needed to return the money or else she'd really sue me along with our parents. I told her to go right ahead and block that number, but in the evening, she texted through another number and said a bunch of things to blackmail me into feeling bad. Apparently, I was cruel and heartless for scamming our parents, and I'd taken advantage of their age and kindness by taking the money from them and now by refusing to return it after they'd practically begged me to. I wish I was there when this begging had happened because to my knowledge, they'd only demanded what was no longer theirs. Also, my parents aren't poor, they could afford to spend $30,000 on us having a kid, and that's why they did so. They retired a couple of months ago after successfully running their own business, and they're making money off of it even now. I'd never asked them for the money, they'd offered it themselves, so now they couldn't go back and pretend to be the victims of some scam. I told my sister to back off once and for all because I really didn't want to ruin my relationship with her, and I knew for a fact that she was only going to such lengths because my parents were manipulating her into doing so. She didn't have a stable job yet, and that's why she was so desperate to have a place to live in, which is why I could still forgive her, but I was kind-hearted, not a fool who would take her back regardless of how much she insulted me. She already had insulted me badly enough for me to never want to speak to her again, so it would be in her best interest to back off because after our parents passed away, we were the only ones she'd be able to count on as family. Anyway, that's not the point right now, so after that text, She replied to me and told me that I was the one who was making my parents miserable and that they were already going through a lot knowing that their grandkid might not make it while I was making it worse by refusing to return the money they'd spent on his birth. I couldn't believe the audacity of that when I was literally a mother who could lose her child, but somehow, even now, they were the victims here and not me. I called my brother to talk about it and he told me that at this point, I should just return the money to get them off my back. I cannot do that because there are a lot of medical expenses to cover given the stem cell transplant that's about to take place in a few weeks from now. I have many more things to think about right now and I honestly don't think that my parents even deserve to have that money back. Point blank, I just don't feel like they should get that money back ever at any point in their lives after the way they've treated me. I don't know if that makes me right or wrong in this situation because I know it's probably not very ethical, but then again, nothing that my parents have done is ethical either. The bottom line is that even if I could, I wouldn't want to return that money to my parents simply out of spite in the way that they've behaved with me. They've said the most unforgivable things a parent can say about their own grandchild, a grandkid they insisted we have, by the way. So I just don't see any reason as to why I should pay them back even if it is the morally right thing to do. I can't make them suffer the way I'm suffering right now, but I can at least bother them like this, and I know it's petty, but right now, I don't care. My son's in a life-threatening situation and all they care about is their money, so they deserve to be treated badly, in my opinion. So Ida for not wanting to return my parents the money that they'd given me as an incentive to have a child after it turns out that my son has an autoimmune disease? Update 1. Firstly, thank you so much everybody for all your kind words and your prayers. I'm hoping it all has its effect. We've been in and out of the hospital for the past few weeks because my son is undergoing chemo at the moment. That's sort of a prerequisite before stem cell transplant for those who weren't aware. The constant hospital visits plus the added harassment that my parents have been putting me through is what made me snap. I've avoided going to the cops so far because the last thing I need is a police report to deal with or legalities to take care of just to get my parents to stop bothering us. I know most of you meant well while suggesting that, but it's not very feasible for us right now, so we're trying to keep that on the back burner for now. It's quite literally our very last resort and we have no intention of taking this to the cops as of now. We're too busy and mentally exhausted to even consider it. We have blocked them on every single platform possible and it's been 3 days since I posted. They haven't tried to contact us as of now, but there's no telling what they might do next. I don't have any intention of paying them back because I'm still sticking with what I said. They don't deserve it. I know some of you guys might disagree with this, but I honestly don't care anymore. Most people thought that I was in the right because they were the ones who pushed me to have a kid in the first place, and now they're mad because our son wasn't the healthy baby boy they wanted. They can cry me a river, but I refuse to feel bad for them and lean into their self-victimization. We're the ones who are suffering because we see our son as a real human being and not as a plaything that we can just discard if it's not good enough by our standards. I don't know what kind of people my parents are, but they don't fit into my definition of good parents anymore. They're the worst because they've put me down at my lowest, and I'm sure this will come back to them at some point in their miserable little lives or whatever is left of it. I don't even feel guilty saying any of this now because the comments have made me realize just how screwed up my parents were. Even my sister said some unforgivable crap, but I was ready to cut her some slack just because I thought she was a kid and needed mom and dad to be on her side, but I take that back now. She's a selfish brat, and I think 21 is old enough to be able to tell apart right from wrong, so there's absolutely no reason for her to be acting this way towards me. Especially when my husband and I have been nothing but kind to her all along. My brother is super disappointed and has cut them all off along with us, which is something I'm really and truly grateful for. He and my husband are pretty much the only people who have kept me going because things have been just so incredibly hard for me mentally. No parent is ever prepared to learn that their kid might not make it, and to face it all while my own family is harassing me for money is just unimaginable. The cruelty and heartlessness have taken their toll on me, but I have to stay strong for Keith's sake and my son's. The transplant is supposed to take place in just 2 weeks and we've been nervous like never before. My husband is the donor and he's a wreck. I've literally never seen him so jittery before. He already has an anxiety disorder, and the crazy situation we're in right now has just made matters worse for his nerves. My parents knew about this, but that didn't stop them because that's how awful they are. I hope this comes back to them tenfold, because otherwise, I'll pretty much lose all faith in the justice of the universe. Update 2. Hi, everyone. My brother called me today to inform me that our parents, along with our sister, had visited him now that I'd blocked them and had threatened to call the cops on them if they bothered us again. They were there to tell him how I'd scammed them out of $30,000, but my brother had been very quick to shut it down. He informed me that he'd chewed them out and they hadn't expected him to be so brutal and harsh with his words. My brother's the calmest guy ever to exist, so if he's being brutal with someone, they've definitely earned it. He hated confrontation, but he told me that after he heard the way mom and dad were talking about me and my son, he couldn't just sit back and let them get away with it. Unfortunately, my parents thought that it would be a good idea to argue, and my sister even tried to back them up, so they had to be unceremoniously evicted from my brother's house by his wife. My sister-in-law is a bit of a hothead, but only when the situation calls for it, and this time, she knew the situation was dire and she needed to step up and push them out. She hadn't even wanted to let them in at all, but our whole family has a soft spot for my younger sister. However, she's really not that young anymore and cannot expect to get away with her horrible behavior. My sister-in-law was very nice to me on the phone since my son's transplant procedure takes place tomorrow, but she won't be able to be there for us. Someone has to stay home and watch the kids, and her usual babysitter bailed on her. My brother's coming along with me though, so I'm hoping that things will be fine. I'm nervous, but it's nothing compared to what my husband has been going through. Keith is still a nervous ball of stress, but I'm doing my best to keep him calm so no unforeseen complications arise. I don't know if that's even possible, to be honest, but at the moment, I'm not willing to take any risks. We talked just a couple of hours ago about how we'd never seen any of this coming, but we're still dealing with it a lot better than we'd expected. We hadn't even planned on becoming parents, but yet here we are, and if fate is on our side, we'll be parents for a really, really long time. I know I've said this before, but please continue to pray for our son's well-being. Also, Keith's, because he's going through a lot, too. I have to be up and about in a few hours, but I've become a bit of an insomniac, which is why I'm posting this so late at night. I guess this is one of those things I'll have to get used to eventually. Update 3. Hi. Thanks for the prayers and good wishes. It's been close to 3 months since the transplant and he's been responding well. I'll keep this update short because we're still busy with a lot of work, including the restraining order I've had to file against my parents and my sister after they started harassing me and cyberbullying me recently. Yep, they're really the worst of the worst. Update 4. More than a year has passed since the last update, and I'll be honest, I'd pretty much forgotten because I got too caught up with my own life. My son celebrated his first birthday a week ago, and we think he's going to live a long, long life now. He's doing just fine, his body is responding well to the procedure, and we could not be more grateful for it. My parents and sister have had no contact with us since we filed that restraining order, and neither has my brother heard from them. We intend on keeping it that way for the rest of our lives because I don't think anyone needs them or their negative energy around their families. I don't care whether they even live or not at this point. They're as good as gone to me. Right now, my only family is Keith, my brother, his family, and of course, my darling little son. I literally don't care about anyone else because these are the people who stood by me in my toughest times, and I know I can always count on them in the future. Also, you guys, because some of you had continued to check up on me through comments and messages, and I'll be forever thankful for that. It really was heartwarming for me to realize that people had continued to pray for my son and our little family. So thank you so much. I forced my wife to go to a party, and now my marriage is ruined. Me and my wife, Kara, have been married for 4 years now. We had an arranged marriage, but so far we have had a good marriage and a strong bond. I love her and would do anything for her in the blink of an eye. Before we got married, we decided that we will have our own individual space and we don't have to tell each other everything unless we feel the other person should definitely know. The arrangement went well for years. I didn't have much to hide or to tell. But she did. When I met Kara for the first time, she was a very conservative person and a bit too devoted to religion. She told me that she wasn't a good person in the past, but since then she has tried to be a good person living a moral life. She told me some details about her past and how she was a wild girl in college and had several relationships and partners. Even after we got married, she would tell me some details about her past, but I never pressed to get details. She always refers to her college self in the third person, and whenever she talks about her past, she always says that her college self is a horrible person. Since then, she has been more devoted to religion and is quite different from her previous self. I have seen some pictures and videos, and Kara is nothing like that person today. Kara doesn't have a lot of friends and mostly spends her time praying or with other religious stuff. I am the only person she shares her thoughts with. A few months ago, out of the blue, she got a call from her best friend from college, Renee. I saw Kara light up after talking to Renee. Kara felt so happy after reconnecting with Renee, and Renee invited her to a party at her place. Renee also called up their other friends from college. Kara was conflicted about going to the party. I convinced her to go, saying the worst that could happen is that she has a boring night. Kara asked me to come along with her. Even during the drive, I was thinking about getting some embarrassing and funny stories about my wife from her friends. When we reached Renee's place, I realized why Kara was conflicted. Kara was dressed very conservatively, light makeup and very little jewelry. Her friends from college were the exact opposite. They were dressed like tweens going out to party all night. The night started normally about the girls sharing funny tales, but the stories quickly became raunchy and then horrifying. I found out Kara and Renee were the leaders of a group of mean girls. They slept around, abused alcohol and drugs, and on occasions ruined people's lives. Kara stepped away to go to the bathroom when the group turned to me and told me stories about my wife. Renee talked about Kara sleeping with most of the professors at their college, which I did know about, but wasn't aware the number was that high. Renee purposely told me about how Kara and Renee systematically gaslight a woman into believing that she is a lesbian and ruined her marriage because her husband had rejected Kara's advances. And all the girls found this incident to be funny. I wanted to leave but I couldn't find Kara. I went to the bathroom to look for her and found her curled up in a corner crying. I picked her up and left immediately. The entire drive back Kara was sobbing and kept repeating I am sorry. She was inconsolable for days and then she threw herself into religion hard. She started praying for 6-8 hours every day. Her daily prayers and rituals usually took 2 hours. I thought that giving her space would help her heal and she would talk to me whenever she is ready. We haven't talked much since then. She still cuddles up in bed but doesn't say anything. Last week she told me that she has decided to be celibate for the rest of her life to repent for her former sins. She asked for my support and apologized for springing it on me. She has told me to leave her if I can't live a celibate life with her. I have tried talking to her about trying therapy but she is adamant on her plan. I ruined my near-perfect life by forcing her to go to that party.
My nightmare mother-in-law ruined our holiday, and my spineless husband refused to stand up to her. I endured their mistreatment afterwards for too long, but then one day I finally snapped. I was ready for the perfect getaway, but instead, I found my mother-in-law at the airport, thanks to my lying husband. So my husband John and I had been planning this dream vacation abroad for months. I worked overtime, skipped out on dinners with friends, and saved up every spare dollar. It was supposed to be just the two of us. But there was one problem. My mother-in-law, Susan. She's never liked me, and she loves to undermine me. She always copies my outfits, criticizes everything I do, and makes snide remarks at family gatherings. When she found out about the trip, she immediately started demanding to come with us. I said no politely at first, but then more firmly after she threw tantrums and threatened to disown my husband if he didn't include her. After weeks of arguments, he finally agreed that this was our trip, and we wouldn't bring her. Fast forward to the airport. I was excited to go until I saw her with luggage. It turns out my husband bought her a ticket behind my back. I couldn't even speak. I was so upset. I turned around, walked straight out, and went home. He followed me, yelling that I ruined everything, and then called my family, who said I should have just sucked it up and gone. When he came home an hour later, all hell broke loose. He started yelling at me, saying it was pathetic and spiteful of me to ruin the trip last minute. I tried to defend myself, but he just wouldn't stop yelling, and he eventually did something I never thought he was capable of doing. He raised his fist at me, he balled it up and held it in the air, but then put it down. He never laid hands on me in the end, but that single act was enough for me to rethink everything. I told him that if he ever does that again, I was out of this relationship, and he quickly apologized, saying he doesn't know what came over him. For the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. John continued to act as though nothing was wrong. He made no real apology or acknowledgement of anything. Instead, he kept insisting that I was blowing things out of proportion. We barely spoke for days, and when we did, it was a surface-level conversation about work or the weather. Then, 3 days after the airport incident, Susan showed up unannounced. I wasn't surprised. She had a way of inserting herself into every situation, even when she wasn't wanted. I opened the door to her standing there with that same smile she always wore when she was up to something. She walked in without even waiting for an invitation, saying she was there to make amends. I braced myself, thinking maybe she'd offer some sort of apology. But no. Instead, she walked into my living room and immediately started rearranging things. She moved my couch, shifted my favorite vase to another table, and even adjusted the picture frames on the wall. I stood there in disbelief, biting my tongue because I knew that if I said anything, it would lead to another fight with John, and I was exhausted. I just wanted peace. So I stayed silent, hoping that once she'd finished her little makeover, she'd leave. But the damage was already done. John came home while she was still there. I waited for him to say something, to defend me, or at least acknowledge that Susan had overstepped. But after he saw the look on my face, all he said was, "She's just trying to help." That was the moment I realized John wasn't on my side. Every time I tried to set boundaries with Susan, he was the one to let her cross them. I thought about confronting Susan and telling her to leave and never come back. It would be no point because John would defend her, just like he always did. That night, I barely got any sleep. My mind kept replaying everything that had happened. The next morning, I decided to take a drive to clear my head. I didn't know where I was going, but I needed to get out of the house. While on the road, I passed a small cafe I hadn't noticed before. Needing a break, I stopped for coffee. As I sat down, my phone buzzed with a message from an old friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She was going through a rough patch in her own marriage and wanted to catch up. I didn't think much of it at the time, but I replied and set up a time to meet later that week. The meeting with her turned out to be eye-opening. She told me about her own struggles with her husband's family, how she'd felt suffocated and neglected. Her story was eerily similar to mine, except she had already made the decision to leave. It was like looking into a mirror of what my life could become if I stayed. She had found happiness again after walking away from her marriage, and for the first time, I started to consider that maybe leaving was an option for me too. A week later was our wedding anniversary. I'd been quietly looking forward to this night despite everything. I'd spent hours planning a romantic dinner, setting up our favorite dishes, lighting candles, and trying to rekindle some sense of intimacy between us. Before I could call for John, Susan showed up again. I don't know how she found out about our plans, but there she was at the door just as I was finishing the final touches on our dinner. John welcomed her in with no hesitation. She immediately took over. She started taking the food I prepared off the stove. Susan insisted on helping us, which meant she would judge everything I made and then take over the cooking. I stood there watching helplessly as she added ingredients, spilled sauces, and rearranged the entire kitchen to her liking. John said nothing. The entire evening, she demanded his attention. She talked nonstop, sharing stories about their family, laughing at inside jokes that excluded me, and basically turning our anniversary into a celebration of her and John's bond. I felt invisible. Every time I tried to join the conversation, I was either ignored or dismissed. I didn't want another fight, especially on our anniversary, so I stayed quiet. When I quietly mentioned to John that this was supposed to be our night, I expected him to understand that what was happening wasn't okay. Instead, he brushed me off with that same tone he always used when it came to her. "My mom just wants to be part of it. You're overreacting again," he told me. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I swallowed it down. He had already chosen her. He always would. That night, as I cleaned up the mess from dinner, I realized something. I wasn't just angry at Susan anymore. I was angry at myself. I had allowed this to happen. A few weeks after the disaster of our anniversary night, I was emotionally drained. I had been walking on eggshells not to bring up what happened that night to ruin our relationship. One evening, while John was out, I was sorting through some paperwork when I noticed something odd. It was a list of our personal expenses, credit card balances, and even details about our mortgage. What made my heart drop was that it wasn't in John's handwriting. It was in Susan's. She had gone through our finances. I confronted John that night. At first, he acted confused, as if he had no idea what I was talking about. But after pressing him, he finally admitted that he'd been discussing our finances with his mom for months, without telling me. She had been giving him advice on how we should be managing our money. He even admitted she suggested we sell our house and move closer to her. She said it would save us money and give us a fresh start. When I asked him why, his response was the same tired excuse I'd heard 1,000 times. She just wants to help. There's nothing wrong with discussing our future with her. That night, the silence between John and me felt heavier than ever. I lay in bed awake and stared at the ceiling. He didn't see anything wrong with what he had done. He didn't understand how deeply it hurt that he had let his mother into the most private parts of our life. And worse, he didn't care. The next day, Susan started making subtle comments. She didn't waste any time wielding the information she had either. She started suggesting major changes to our spending habits. Every little thing I bought was suddenly scrutinized. "Did we really need to spend that much on groceries?" she asked me one day. "Why not downgrade your car to something cheaper?" she asked another day. And then, she started openly pushing the idea of selling the house. She casually mentioned it at every opportunity, acting like it was the best decision for us. When I confronted John again, asking how he could let her do this, he once again brushed it off. He said she was just concerned about our future, and that he would try to talk to her if it was that much of an issue to me. I was talking to my old friend from the cafe, and she said the one thing that she wished she would have tried was therapy. I took that advice, and in a last attempt to save my marriage, I suggested couples counseling to John. Part of me still hoped that maybe John would finally wake up and see what his mother was doing to us. When I brought it up, he looked hesitant, but after some convincing, he agreed to give it a try. That small sliver of hope was enough to keep me going. Things finally started to look up. The day of our first therapy session came, and I was nervous but optimistic. I hoped the therapist could help us finally rekindle the spark that we had before, but just as the therapist called us in, the door swung open, and there was Susan. She walked in, smiling like this was her session too. My heart dropped. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. John had told her everything. He had told her about our decision to go to therapy. I didn't even have to ask. The look on his face said it all. He saw nothing wrong with her being there. In fact, he had probably invited her. My stomach churned as I realized just how deep this went. The session quickly turned chaotic. Susan immediately jumped into the conversation, claiming that she was only trying to be a part of our lives. She explained every boundary she had crossed and every moment she had inserted herself into our marriage, and John sat there nodding along. The therapist tried to mediate and suggested that maybe we needed to set clear boundaries. But John pushed back, saying that I was too sensitive and accused me of trying to isolate him from his family. The therapist's words were drowned out by Susan. I could barely focus. All I could hear was John taking his mother's side. It was too much. I walked out of the session feeling more alone than ever. The glimmer of hope I had felt was gone. The reality hit me hard. John wasn't going to change. No matter how much I begged or how much I tried to make him understand, understand. He would always put his mother first. Days passed. I found myself pulling away even more. I wondered how much longer I could keep fighting this battle. But just as I was about to give up entirely, I got some news. I received a job offer, a big one. It was in another city, hours away, but it was everything I had been working toward in my career. The pay was better, the opportunities were endless, and most importantly, it felt like a fresh start. I was excited. For the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a spark of hope. Maybe this job could be the fresh start John and I needed. I rushed home. I was excited to share the news with him, but when I told him, his reaction stunned me. Instead of the support I had hoped for, he shut it down immediately. He said we couldn't move because his mom wouldn't approve of it, and it was too far from family. The only family that lived in our city was his mom, so I knew he was only referring to her. I stood there, speechless. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. That was his reasoning for turning down a life-changing opportunity. I tried to reason with him. I begged him to see that this job could be the fresh start we needed. I pointed out how much it would benefit us financially, emotionally, and all around, but his response crushed me. He said he wouldn't abandon his mom no matter what because she wouldn't do that to him. At that moment, everything became crystal clear. I would always come second to Susan. That was the breaking point. I couldn't pretend anymore. I decided to stop sacrificing my own happiness and self-worth just to stay in a marriage where I clearly wasn't respected or valued. I had fought for so long, but I realized I had been fighting alone. I made the decision to leave. Filing for divorce was one of the hardest things I've ever done, but I knew it was the only way to live the life that I deserved. I sat John down and explained that I couldn't stay in a marriage where I was constantly overshadowed and disrespected. I was made to feel like an outsider in my own home. He didn't understand, of course. He never would. He continued to blame me for the breakdown of our marriage. He refused to see how his own actions and his mother's constant interference had driven us apart, but I was done trying to make him see. The day I left, I felt a strange mix of sadness and relief. It hurt to walk away from the man I had once loved, but at the same time, I felt like a weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I could breathe again. I accepted the job offer in the new city and packed up my things, ready to start over. In the aftermath, John continued to paint himself as the victim and told his family and mine that I had overreacted and that I was the one who had given up on our marriage. But deep down, I knew the truth. I hadn't given up. I had fought harder than anyone should have to, but there comes a point where you realize that you can't change anyone or make someone love you. Moving to the new city was the best decision I ever made. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I started my new job, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living my own life. And even though the scars of my marriage still hurt, I've found peace in knowing that I chose myself.
Gave birth to twins and gained weight. My mill kept commenting and gave me a weighing machine as a birthday gift. I lost it and left with the babies. Now my husband wants me to apologize. Recently, I gave birth to twins, and obviously, that has led to a bit of weight gain. I've spoken to the professionals and they have assured me that this is completely natural and normal after a pregnancy, especially after twins. And soon enough, with a proper diet and regular exercise, I'll be able to come back to my original size. To be honest, I'm not even very concerned about that, since I used to be really thin earlier and I think putting on a bit of weight has been good for me. Besides, right now, my primary goal is to be a good mother to my children, no matter what weight I am at. But I don't think my mother-in-law agrees with it since she has made it very clear that she doesn't want me at this size right now. Agnes, my mother-in-law, used to be a model, so she's pretty conscious about her appearance, and that's great. I find it wonderful that even at her age, she always takes great care of herself. But for her to expect the same of me, especially after I have given birth to twins, I think that's a bit unrealistic, and I was really upset for the past couple of weeks because she kept insisting that I needed to lose weight. I was getting annoyed by my husband's family anyway because they kept visiting every other day and my mother-in-law had practically made a home in our house. So this meant that I barely got any alone time and I was forced to entertain guests all day long for the past 3 weeks. I tried to be polite about it, but my husband felt that it was normal for his family to want to come over all the time since his family loved him and they couldn't believe that he was a father now, so they wanted to meet the baby as soon as possible as well. I could understand that his family was excited, but I feel like it shouldn't be the norm to keep visiting a woman who has just given birth since I'm honestly just exhausted right now. Anyway, I was pretty annoyed by the fact that Agnes was visiting every day already, and instead of helping me out, she would expect me to do everything around the house and she thought that she was doing me a favor by looking after the kids instead. I thought it was kind of unfair since I was the one who was their mother, so if she really wanted to help me she should have taken care of the other chores and let me look after my babies. That was bad enough as it is, and on top of that, she just kept taking potshots at me about my weight. The rest of my husband's family found it funny, but I did not, and neither did my parents, who told me that I had to stand up to these people and make sure that they didn't behave this way with me. The problem with me is that, by nature, I'm a really non-confrontational person and I find it very difficult to talk about what's bothering me, but after my parents visited me, I decided to tell my husband that I was not fine with his mother making an issue of my weight so publicly, and neither was I fine with her or his family visiting us every day. That led to an argument since he believed that I was being unreasonable. He said that I'm not very close to my family, which is why they didn't visit that often, and it was kind of true. But another reason that they didn't visit that often was because I had been very clear that I needed some time to myself with the babies before I was ready to entertain guests. I tried to explain to him that these frequent visits from his family were making me irritable and I was exhausted from dealing with them, but he turned around on me and made it sound like I was being selfish. And I am not really in a condition to keep fighting and arguing, so I let that one go and dropped the argument, even though I shouldn't have. Because I guess that's what led to this incident that took place a couple of days back, on my birthday. I had specifically told my husband that I did not want a birthday party, I just wanted to spend the day alone with him and the kids. And I thought that since it was my birthday, he would respect it, but unfortunately, that's not how the situation played out. I spent the morning at my parents' place since they had invited me for birthday lunch, and that's a ritual that we follow every year. Usually, my husband also accompanies me, but this year, he said that he was feeling a bit under the weather and that he wanted to stay home. Around the evening, when I finally came back home, my husband had invited his entire family and a bunch of our friends to the house to surprise me. This was exactly what I didn't want, but since they were already here, I decided to put on a happy face and pretend that I had the energy to deal with this. I was really tired and I just wanted to nap, but after I had cut the cake, Agnes told me that it was time to unwrap the presents, and even though I told her that I wanted to get some rest, she insisted that I do it and I opened hers first. I was too tired to put up a fight, so I did what she asked just to get it over with, and I completely flipped out when I unwrapped her present to me and realized that she had given me a weighing machine. For the past couple of weeks, ever since I had given birth, I had found my husband and his family increasingly more annoying to deal with, but this was just the last straw for me. Agnes had been the worst of all, constantly bringing up how much weight I had put on, and that I had to shed it off all quickly, and this was what finally tipped me over the edge. I started freaking out at her, and I really gave her a piece of my mind. I had stayed quiet for long enough, but once I started yelling at her, I just couldn't bring myself to stop and let it all out. I told her that she had no business talking about my body, especially after I had given birth to the grandchildren that she constantly came over to see, without even bothering to ask if I would be okay with it. Then I yelled at her for a bit about how she had become an absolute nuisance to deal with since she never helped me out whenever she came over and expected me to do all the menial tasks, while she got to play with the kids that I had carried for 9 months. I said a lot of other things as well before I asked her to get out of my house and kicked her out of the party, and I also told my husband's family that after this party, I did not want them visiting me at all until I had specifically invited them. I was absolutely furious and I did not care in the slightest about what they thought of me, I just wanted them all to leave me alone with my babies. After yelling at them, I didn't even bother speaking to my husband and just went to the bedroom with the babies and went to sleep. I did wake up quite a few times after that, but my husband was nowhere to be found. I was kind of worried, but I was also really upset, so I did not even call him. It wasn't until the next morning that I finally saw him again, and when I asked him where he had been, he told me that he had spent the night at a friend's place because, after my outburst, he did not feel like staying with me. He seemed upset and I felt a little bad about my behavior as well, since I had really insulted him and his family the night before. But I had been pushed to the edge, so I couldn't say that it was all my fault. Anyway, I thought that we could discuss it and talk it out, but instead, he told me that his mother was really upset about everything. And the worst part was that now, both he and Agnes expected me to apologize to her for my behavior because she was an elderly woman, and she had never been humiliated like that before. They also felt like I had overreacted since she was only trying to look out for my health. So here's a couple of things about Agnes: she's just 54. That doesn't count as elderly at all, at least not in my books. And she has always been very weird about people's appearances, very judgmental and snarky. In fact, sometimes I feel like the only reason she was so nice to me before I got pregnant was because I fit her idea of what an attractive woman should look like. Like I said, I was really naturally skinny and she had complimented me on that several times. If I'm being honest, it feels like she's obsessed with being thin, and maybe that has something to do with the fact that she used to be a model in her early 20s before she became a mother, but I'm not a model and neither am I planning on becoming one anytime soon. So I don't understand why I have to be that thin as well. Also, if she really was concerned about my health and well-being, then she wouldn't have put me in a position where I had to entertain guests all the time without any help and do all the work around the house while she just played with the kids. She would have actually done something to make sure that I wasn't under a lot of stress and would have at least helped me out around the house. In fact, even with the kids, she would literally just play with them, but when it came to feeding them or changing the diapers, she would call for me. So I wasn't buying the fact that she was only looking out for my health, since then she would have actually done something to help and not just nitpick at my weight. And if my doctor thinks that I'm at a healthy weight, then I don't understand why she thinks that her opinion matters more. So when my husband told me that I had to apologize to Agnes, because she was really upset, it really rubbed me the wrong way. He had already screwed up after I had given birth by never bothering to think about what I was going through, and forcing me to constantly put up with his family. But I had done it all with a smile on my face because I wanted to make it work with him. After the party, though, I had realized where his priorities were, and it was a bit of a reality check for me, that I desperately needed. It was evident that for him, his family came first and I came second, and I wasn't ready to deal with that anymore. So I didn't even fight with him when he said that he wanted me to apologize to Agnes. I just quietly got up and went to my bedroom and started packing my stuff. He didn't bother to follow me, he stayed in the living room, and after a while, when I was done packing, I decided to take the kids with me and go live with my parents. I could have left without saying goodbye, but I decided to tell him exactly where I was going, and I said that if he wanted to be a mama's boy then he was free to do so, but it was unfair of him to expect me to put up with his family. I told him that he had been really disrespectful towards me and what I wanted, and the fact that after the party, he had just left and the kids on our own showed us exactly how little he cared for us. So now, I wanted him to contact me only when he was serious about his family, and I meant the family that he had chosen, not the one he was born in. He didn't say much to me, only that he would expect me to let him come visit the kids whenever he wanted, but unless I apologized to Agnes and the rest of the family, he had no intention of making things right with me. So I could live with my parents for as long as I wanted to, but he was not going to tolerate this kind of behavior. And then, I left, and for the past 3 days, I've been staying with my parents. They know the situation and they think that I should think about getting a divorce, but right now, I'm not really sure what to do. Because he has been a common occurrence with my husband, I wouldn't have thought twice before leaving. But that's the catch, we have been together for almost 6 years and married for 3, and he has never behaved like this. He has always been very attached to his family, especially his mother, since his father was always too busy for him. And their relationship had only become stronger after my father-in-law passed away last year. That had never been an issue for me, though, since he had always treated me well. This change in his behavior that has taken place after he became a father, that's what I don't understand. It feels like he doesn't care about me at all, even though during my pregnancy, he had treated me like I was the Queen of England. And this is what I'm constantly bumping up against, because even if I want to leave him for his behavior right now, I can't stop thinking about the fact that he never used to be like this before, and it might be crazy, but I've been considering the fact that maybe I'm actually the one at fault here. I've heard about plenty of cases of postpartum depression where women become increasingly irritable, and have bouts of anxiety and stuff. So maybe I can't see that I'm being unreasonable, but he can, and maybe he's right. But at the same time, given the circumstances, I hardly think that my anger is unjustified. If I speak to my friends or my parents about this, I'm sure that they are going to be on my side, so that's going to be a little pointless. And so, I've come to Reddit to ask for help so I can make sure that I'm not being selfish and unreasonable like my husband believes, and that I actually do have cause to be mad. So Ida for kicking my mother-in-law out for talking about my weight and telling my husband's family that I don't want them visiting me right now? Update 1. Hi, everyone. So it has been 2 days since I posted, and I've been really conflicted about what to do, because most people in the comments said that I shouldn't reach back out to him and that I should speak to a lawyer immediately. And I told my parents about it, they suggested the same thing as well and put me in touch with an attorney. But it just didn't feel right for me to file for a divorce before at least giving him one last chance to at least explain himself. I was about to contact him, but, thankfully, he came to me himself. Now, we were not exactly able to make up, but at least we had a discussion. Last evening, he came by to see the kids, and it was very awkward, but the babies seemed happy enough to see him. He played with them for a while and then he started talking to me since I had stayed in the room. My parents had the good sense to go to their bedroom and leave us alone as soon as he came over, in case we wanted to discuss anything. Anyway, both of us were much calmer yesterday and were able to actually have a dignified and civil discussion rather than just one of us walking away angrily. I told him that his recent behavior had made me feel very confused, because so far, he had always shown great care for my feelings, but right now, it felt like it didn't matter to him. It felt like he only cared about his family and nothing else, not even me. It was very difficult for me to take it because I was the mother of his kids. I felt like that demanded a certain amount of respect and care. I also told him that the way Agnes had behaved with me and the way she had been pushing me to lose weight just 3 weeks after I had given birth to twins, was ridiculous, and he should have taken a stand for me instead of defending it. He was silent for a couple of minutes, and then he said that he wanted to apologize for not taking a stand for me when it came to Agnes. He was just very confused, but he had to come to the realization that his mother had been wrong for constantly pushing me to lose weight. Apparently, the night that I had kicked her out of my party, she had called him later on, and she had been sobbing on the phone, which is why he had felt so terrible about the way I had behaved with his mother and thought that I should apologize to her. But then, he had thought about it for a while and realized that Agnes actually had been quite pushy about the weight thing and she had brought it upon herself. So maybe I didn't need to apologize for it, and he had to tell me that he had spoken to Agnes, and she was mad so she wouldn't be saying to me anytime soon, but he wanted to say that he was sorry. He also told me that he was sorry for not realizing this earlier. He had genuinely thought that Agnes only cared about my health and that's why she wanted me to lose weight, but giving me a weighing machine and forcing me to open it in front of that many people was humiliating and she shouldn't have done that. So I was glad that at least he had come to his senses regarding his mother and was apologizing for it. But that was not all that I wanted to talk about. We also needed to talk about the fact that he had not treated me as well as I deserved to be lately. And by that, I meant the fact that he had continued to constantly force his family's presence on me, even though I had made it very clear that I wanted to be on my own for a while with just him and the kids since I was exhausted, and that meant both emotionally and physically. I guess I had mentioned in my original post that I had brought it up with him earlier as well, and he had argued with me, calling me selfish for wanting to keep him and our kids away from his family. I didn't want to drag out that fight, so I dropped it, but since it had become a bit of an issue in our relationship, I brought it up once again. This time, I had no intention of dropping it until it was sorted out. He had apologized about the thing with Agnes, but here, he told me that he did not think he was wrong. Apparently, his family was really excited that he had become a father and it was a huge deal for everyone. That's not very surprising because right from his childhood, he has kind of been the darling of his family, and that has meant that I have also been showered with a lot of love and affection by them. But whenever they would come over in the past 3 weeks, it would only be me who would have to sacrifice time with my babies to entertain them, and occasionally cook for them, and even though it might not have seemed like a lot of work to him, it took a toll on me. And I told him that it was not fair, since neither he nor his mother had been of any help to me. Even though he had started working from home, he barely did any of the household chores anymore because he was always busy with the kids, and that responsibility fell on me. As for Agnes, I have already said that she never did anything around the house, and one came over to play with the kids, and didn't even help me out with changing them and stuff. So I was pretty upset about that as well. Here, though, he said that he could understand that it had become a lot of work for me, but it was unfair of me to expect him to tell his family that they were not allowed to come over at all. All of them were very excited and he did not want to squash, which is why he had argued with me. And I'm not very close with my family, apart from my parents, so my relatives had only video called me to congratulate me and see the babies, but hadn't visited so far. Part of the reason for that was that I had specifically instructed them not to come over right now and that I would tell them when I was ready to have visitors. I tried to explain to my husband that no matter how much they loved us, it was very important to have boundaries as well, but he refused to understand what I was getting at. He just kept insisting that his family was doing this out of love, not just for him, but also for me and the babies. And I couldn't overlook that, since that would be disrespectful. They were a very close-knit family and since I had always known it, he didn't understand why I was making a big deal of it right now. After one point, it started feeling like we were just talking in circles, so I told him that there was clearly no point in discussing this further. We hadn't been able to come to a conclusion about this problem that we were facing, since he strongly believed that he was right and I think that I am right. So I told him that I needed some more time to think about what I wanted to do right now and that until then, I would be staying with my parents. As of now, I have put each and every thought of getting a divorce on hold. Because I really want to do right by my kids and at this moment, I'm not sure what that would mean. A divorce is a big deal and once I get involved, I can never go back. So whatever I have to do, I have to think about it very carefully and I don't want to make a mistake. This is why I have decided that I'm going to take my time, and talk about this to my husband, a couple of times more, and if we are still not able to come to a conclusion that works for both of us, then I might, but I'm treating that as a last option right now. Update 2. Hey, so 2 days ago, my husband visited me and I'm still thinking about what I want to do. But a couple of hours ago, I did receive a text from Agnes, and that was quite surprising because she was actually apologizing to me. Of course, the tone was very passive-aggressive, and it was very obvious to me that she didn't really want to apologize, but she still did. Even if it was just for the sake of maintaining a civil relationship, she did. She told me that she had heard from her son that I had left home with the kids and she knew that she was part of the reason that I had done this, so she felt like it was her responsibility to try and make this right. Personally, I don't agree with her. This is between me and my husband and maybe she was a part of the reason why we had a fight in the first place, but she can't exactly help us sort this out. Anyway, she said that she really didn't want us to separate because that might not be the best move for the kids. Again, I can't agree with that because I think if we separate right now, it might be better for them in the long run because they'll never have known us as a couple in the first place. I think that's a better alternative than sticking together, being toxic for a couple of years, and then traumatizing both our children before we eventually part ways. Anyway, I'm not thinking about a divorce right now, so that doesn't actually apply. Regardless of that, Agnes apologized and said that if this helped the situation, she would be glad to say that she was sorry about how she treated me. Even though she is still going to maintain that she was only trying to look out for my health and make sure that I didn't compromise my well-being. She claimed that he came from an era where being skinny was considered the healthiest and maybe she was mistaken, but that's what she had been raised to believe, and she had been imposing on me, which was wrong. If I'm being frank, her apology was all over the place and it was kind of contradictory in itself, but hey, at least I received one and that's something to think about. I'm not sure if my husband had put her up to this or not, but it doesn't matter. Like I said, my relationship with my husband does not depend on her apology. I replied to Agnes and told her that it was fine, that I forgive her and I'm still thinking about what I want to do about the situation with my husband, but I'm thankful that she took the initiative to apologize to me. But yes, I still have no idea what to do, so some advice would be greatly welcome. Update 3. Hey, it has been 2 weeks since I left home and for the past 2 weeks, my husband and I have been talking about everything back and forth. At first, he would only visit to see the kids and ask me if I had changed my mind and I would say no. And then, we would have another argument about who was being selfish, but both of us got pretty exasperated after one point. It got really annoying, so I just told him that maybe it would be for the best to just end it and move on with our lives since we were obviously never going to be able to work this out. I think that was about 10 days ago, and when I said that, he got really quiet and asked me if that was really what I wanted. And that forced me to really think about the situation, whether that was what I wanted or not, and honestly, I didn't. What I really wanted was for him to understand me, to apologize to me, and to make everything right again. That was what I really wanted, and that's what I told him. That day, he told me that he wanted the same thing as well because, at the end of the day, we really loved each other. We had been together for 6 years, we had kids together now, and I don't know, but this seems like something worth fighting for. That day, he told me that he was going to come back the next day after work with a clearer head and we would try to sort things out. Because obviously, if both of us wanted to make it for each other, there was no reason for us to get a divorce. And I decided to do the same, to think about everything with a clearer head and keep an open mind. To try and understand him instead of trying to defeat him, just so that we would be able to make this work. After that, he started visiting every day and there was a lot of explaining, a lot of listening, some arguing, some apologizing, and a lot of reassurance. 2 days ago, we felt like we had finally been able to sort things out, and it was really relieving because I did not want to leave him. He promised me that he would tell his family, and especially Agnes, that right now, it was not the perfect time to visit us so frequently and that we needed our own space. And I would apologize to the rest of his family for my outburst the other day at my party. We have also promised each other that from now on, it's going to be us against the problem and not us versus each other, since that's clearly not going to lead us anywhere and it's only going to hurt each other. We don't want that, and we definitely don't want to hurt the kids, so we're going to try and be better partners so we can eventually be better parents. I'm going back home with him tomorrow, and my parents are also pretty happy about the way we were able to deal with this. So I guess all's well that ends well. Thank you so much for all the advice.